All right, hobby enthusiasts, I've got an unboxing here. Wargames delivered the starter selection Army Painter set. 18 paints, ready to go. Everything you need in support of starting to paint your miniatures. And we're going to explore this from the perspective of somebody brand new to the hobby, jumping in with that question, how do we get started? And what's really interesting about being both a wargaming enthusiast, but also a board gaming enthusiast and someone who enjoys painting miniatures, the lines between board gaming and wargaming are becoming blurred more and more every day. It used to be that if you were a wargamer playing Battletech or Warhammer 40,000, you were going to paint your miniatures. You were going to jump into that aspect of the hobby. But what we've seen over the past couple of years, this idea with board games, not only have they gotten more complex with the rules in miniatures, but some of the core games have fantastic miniatures. Look at Nemesis, that rival wargaming systems. And I see more and more friends that don't have any type of painting experience because they're primarily board gamers, jumping in and asking the question to myself and other friends, well, where would I get started? How would I even jump into this? And even with all the amazing resources on YouTube, the question is, what set do I begin with? What colors do I need? Where do I start? Because the last thing you want to do is have that massive momentum, that enthusiasm, jump in with a starter set and realize like I'm missing something, or I don't really have the colors that I want, or what the heck do I even do with this? And what I really liked about this starter set, this hobby set, it's not crippleware. It's not a couple of paints just to kind of get 3 colors on your miniature and it looks kind of good enough, but you're gonna have to buy a bunch of other stuff. Truly in opening this set and exploring it, I'm gonna use it to paint 2 sets of miniatures that I'm gonna follow up with. We're gonna paint some Battletech, some of the new plastics from Catalyst. I'm excited to get those on the table. And I'm finally gonna paint my runebound miniatures. And if you've been following some of my other vlogs, I love and videos playing runebound. It's almost like, Fritz, you love the game so much. It's only 12 dudes, 12 characters. Why haven't you painted them? Because I'm always playing runebound, but this is a chance now to really jump in and illustrate a set like this is going to let you paint your miniatures. And I want to encourage you absolutely to paint your miniatures. There's so many amazing resources on YouTube, not only showing you the exact systems, but showing you a lot of tech, a lot of tools, a lot of talent. But you need the starter set. All right, jumping in, why this is a true starter set. So from my perspective, of someone that's been painting for a while, a true starter set does 3 things. It gives you literally everything you need to paint up those first couple of batches of miniatures with confidence. It is expandable, meaning if you decide, look, I painted up a few of my board games, I'm really good, I'm satisfied. But if you want to paint more or really jump into the hobby, you can build on the set. It's not like I had to spend money and I've got this going and now, okay, I need to ditch it and get a true starter set or a true selection of sets. You can add individual paints to this. You can jump into their medium and upper tier sets, and this still is tremendously useful. And then the third aspect, of course, or some should say maybe this was the first aspect, the palette. The color selection. Of course, I want the usual colors, the primary colors that we're going to utilize for painting miniatures, but there's a few colors that I also want to have available if I'm painting both fantasy and sci-fi miniatures, more so sci-fi based miniatures. This set has all of them. So the unboxing, 2 trays, holds everything, ready to go. It came with this old school how to paint book. And I know there's a lot of resources on YouTube, but I really appreciated this from the perspective of someone that is jumping in for the first time. Because while it doesn't cover everything, this set is geared towards, you just want your miniatures to look good. And there is a little bit of that intimidation. I mean that in a good way. If you're jumping in and you're going to paint your miniatures, I don't want to make any mistakes. Can I do it? How do I do it? What are the steps? This really shows you from the perspective of preparing your miniatures, painting your miniatures, basing your miniatures. It's introducing you to the culture and the steps on how to paint and what to do, followed up perfectly by YouTube videos and other kind of resources online. So it's going to give you the important aspects of shading, of highlighting, different types of brushes to use, kind of give you that vocabulary to jump in with this set and then to further kind of expand out your skills as you move forward. So let's look at some of the colors. What I liked right away was the fact that these are the dropper type paint bottles. Some paint bottles out there are kind of the old school inkwell type bottles. Some of them are kind of a screw top type bottle. I prefer these not only for flow and control, meaning I want to use as little paint as possible. There's a lot of paint in here. It doesn't look like much, but this paints a ton of miniatures. You don't need a lot of paint. They're ready to go. So being able to drip this out, use a small amount, but more importantly, especially from the perspective of someone new to the hobby, not that we ever want to leave our paints uncovered, but occasionally as you're setting up your palette or you're painting and you're looking at things or you're testing certain colors on miniatures to kind of get an idea of what it looks like, you leave your paints open, especially if it's the washes. We're going to talk about the washes in a moment. You leave your paints open. If you knock it over, it's not going to be a spill of a disaster. So I appreciate it for the flexibility, the fact that they don't dry out, the control, and I find them helpful in that when I'm painting a miniature and I'm thinking about the colors I'm going to utilize, to just literally line up the colors that I'm going to use for that miniature. So this way they're not only right there, but I can see how they're going to layer. I can see how they're going to work. Very, very small footprint. Personal preference. I prefer these types of paint. So I was very happy to see that. We've got 2 starter set brushes. One for general painting, one for fine detail. These brushes are just fine to start. Absolutely great. They're going to kind of introduce you to the 2 types of brushes. You can get by utilizing these brushes for a long, long time. And then again, when it's time to expand out, you're ready to go from that perspective. Before we even jump in to the actual colors, what I really enjoyed seeing here was a primer, a brush-on primer. So this idea of miniature prep, one of the first things that you want to do is clean up your miniatures, remove any mold lines, kind of pose the miniature, bend some things back if needed. But we want to prime them. So this way the paint will not only hold to it, but it'll pop. And there's a lot of preference and there's a lot of science behind, do you use a black primer? Do you use a white primer? Depends on the miniature size, depends on the scale, depends on the palette that you're going to utilize. And I'm not going to get into that right now, but when in doubt, you go with gray. So that they included a brush-on gray primer, I think this is absolutely fantastic. You're going to paint up 20 or 30 board gaming miniatures. You're jumping in, you want to do a couple of sets. That's going to get me started. Then we're going to jump into the paints themselves. We've got the standard colors. We've got the red. We've got the green. We've got the brown. That's going to cover kind of a palette of fantasy miniatures. If we were doing Chain of Command, World War II, I've got all the colors that I need here. If I was jumping into sci-fi, I have those colors. I was also happy to see 2 metallics, a plate mail metal and a gold. Simply because with these 2, jumping into the sci-fi, I want to have that metal metallic. And I want to be able to utilize those metallics for gun ports, for barrels, for weapons. And we don't always see the 2 types of metallics in a lot of different sets. So I was happy to see that they're giving you some metallics. Now we've got these 2 empty bottles. And we've got these 2 sets here. A bunch of BBs, a bunch of ball bearings, mixing balls. This was very interesting because taking these base colors, occasionally what we'll do if we're painting an army or if we're painting a series of miniatures, you want to mix some custom colors. either something not included in the set, or you want to take something a shade up higher or a shade a little bit lower. These are kind of all the primary colors in that mid-spectrum. Having two types of droppers that I can mix the paints in, throw in those mixing balls, shake it up, it's going to mix up perfectly. Now I have that for the entire army. Now I have that not only if I want to expand the set by 2, but again, if I'm working on that custom work, if I'm painting up my Lance House Davian and I need a custom yellow, I mix that up. We now have that saved, because one of the things that I learned early on the hard way, was if you mix custom colors every single time, especially if we're moving higher or lower on that scale, it's hard to do it again. It's I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's hard to do it again. And if I'm painting 20 or 30 miniatures, I'm not going to do it all in one sitting. So to be able to mix up some paint and have that consistency and literally bottle it ready to go, that's a nice attention to detail that I was very, very happy to see from the perspective of this set. And I want to pull this one out for later. We also have 2 washes. So this is a paint set, but also a starter set. Washes are a great way to kind of fill in a lot of the details of a miniature, to kind of be able to build a base to make it pop more, that then you can use for some highlighting and for some other aspects. Understanding how to use a wash, it's not just kind of slapping it on the miniature. You want to actually use the smallest amount possible. That's an important first step in understanding painting miniatures. We talk about this idea of tabletop quality, getting 3 colors, getting a wash, getting some highlights, getting a little bit of dry brushing. So to understand those steps and to truly be able to do it all and have these 2 washes included in there, I was like, wow, that is really something. I was very, very happy to see that. And again, being the eyedropper bottles, when these get knocked over, it's not just going to be a total disaster. And then finally, enough to get you started, we've got a varnish in there. Now, there's this idea, especially with board gaming miniatures, where you're going to play them, they're going to go away, they're going to be taken out, they're going to get dropped on the floor, your friend's going to step on them, they're going to be taking a lot of back and forth and use. Often what miniature enthusiasts will do is to put a varnish on the paint, and it not only locks it and seals it in, but it also prevents it from chipping or getting damaged. Some people believe in sealing and varnishing absolutely everything. Others will say, hey, certain models, when you do that, it does change the paint a little bit. It changes the perspective. I never varnish my models. Some people say that, yes and no. I'm about 50-50. Zombicide Black Plague, which gets played almost every other week and is just absolutely chewed through, I did varnish and seal those models simply because it gets the most play. Some of my Battletech stuff is, some of my Warhammer stuff isn't. But again, this gets you started. This allows you to play with those techniques. This allows you to truly have that miniature painting experience, from priming to actually painting to washing to mixing your colors with your brushes and then varnishing what you do. So what role do I see this playing? Again, if you want to jump in, paint your miniatures. You've got Runebound, you've got Nemesis, you've got Dark Souls, you've got that board game where you're like, you know what? I want to paint it. I want to do it. This is everything that you need. And if you just paint a couple of board games with this set, it's paid for itself. It looks great. It brings the narrative and level of your game up. And likewise, if you then decide, hey, I kind of like this, I can do it, and you absolutely can do it. I want to start painting all my toys. This set will plug in with the Wargames delivered mid-tier and upper-tier sets, which expand the colors, expand the brushes, expand the techniques, and a fantastic, fantastic set. Starter selection, definitely not crippleware. I'm going to put In the info box under this video and in the comments, the link from Wargames Delivered where you can check this out, find more videos, find more about it. And if you're interested in it, to check it out more. And I want to encourage you absolutely to jump in and paint your miniatures to help bring that narrative to the best and the highest of the tabletop that you can. I will see you guys in the game.